Welcome back to the Library of Chaos podcast. I'm Wozniak.
And I'm Oberon.
And I'm Jim Matthias IV. Welcome to the second episode of the podcast nobody asked for, where a bunch of grown men talk for way too long about tie-in fan fiction.
Well, this is technically going to be episode 4 because of we're taking longer to record than we quite realised. We had a lot of talk in us. We probably will this time as well.
That wasn't episode 4. That was episode 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. This is episode 2.1.
I think it's going to be episode 4.
The video title will disagree with you there.
The video title is going to be episode 4.
Title.
But this is going to be our second set of recordings. And we are going to be looking...
I'm still going to call each episode by each particular series of books we're going, so I'll just have a different numbering structure to the rest of you.
Well, how about we settle for calling this Series 2?
I mean, it's pretty easy to see why it took us 5 hours to record the original 3 episodes.
So let's hope that this one goes by a lot quicker. And what are we talking about today, gentlemen?
We are talking about the Space Wolf books. We are looking at the first omnibus, which comprises of the novels Space Wolf, Ragnar's Claw, and Grey Hunter. First up, we're going to be looking at Space Wolf.
And 2 Roadies books.
These are by William King. These are, again, some of the very first books in Black Library. I think Space Wolf was the second book written and published under the Black Library brand. And there's a foreword in the book we read, this time with no spoilers, which goes into detail about the fact that, these were supposed to be sold to the average person in a bookstore rather than sold to fans, as they
quite the early days.
No major spoilers, at least. Does he not discuss a bit about what is actually going to be happening in the book?
Well, I think we can talk about what the idea of the book is. I don't think it's a spoiler to say because that's kind of something you want to know before you pick up the book. So we'll get into what the book is. Now. Space Wolf is a book about Ragnar Blackmane and his journey to becoming a Space Marine in the Space Wolf chapter. So it's we get to see basically right from the start, starting as not a Space Marine and ending the book as a Space Marine. I think that's a pretty good summary of what the idea of the book is.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what happens at least. And sorry, I meant the pre-word you were talking about. Does he not go into some detail about what actually happens? I remember him saying something about, what Ragnar does in the book and stuff. And you were saying there's no spoilers in there. I just find it kind of interesting that he actually does kind of at least try to set the scene at least.
Oh, there's not really much in the way you can spoil. Guy becomes a Space Marine, things happen to before he becomes a Space Marine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember exactly what he says in the foreword, but I just remember him talking about
He talks a bit about structure, about how it follows on from Viking mythology, how it was very early written, bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I just flicked through it. I don't think it talks about anything too specific. So,
so it's with...
No spoiler warnings like with the first and only 20th anniversary edition.
Yeah, it's definitely not as bad as that, yeah. So it is worth noting
to a novel that doesn't have a foreword.
Oh. Well, that'll be...
Well, I imagine it'll be one of the ones that isn't written 20 years ago.
Well...
And has
probably will be. It's going to be one of the ones nobody cares about.
I think it might be Eisenhorn. Although they probably have forewords now as well. It might be Eisenhorn.
Any book that has a recently published omnibus.
Yeah. Anyway, so there's a few things I want to talk about with Space Wolf before we get into spoilers. So one of them is probably this book is set on Fenris, as you would expect for a Space Wolf being picked up as an aspirant and turning into a Space Wolf. It's on Fenris. There's a lot of world building, and I quite like it. There's some big themes of not just introducing you to Fenris as a 40k world, but also it's weaving in a bit of both Viking and Norse mythology, and also there's some a bit of general fantasy themes as well that I quite like.
Well, it makes sense given that William King is also very famous for writing the Gotrek and Felix books of fantasy.
That makes sense.
So a quick question about William King. Did William King write any Horus Heresy books that I have read?
No, but he did do the original, the Siege of Terra, the original, what everything was built upon. He kind of laid the foundation for it.
Yes. Yeah, that's actually quite a significant piece of lore. It's 5 or 6 pages?
He wrote a lot of significant stuff.
Yeah, and then he disappeared at some point.
And then he came back briefly, but that's a topic for a long way in the future.
I have
So
heard.
so I have actually read that short story then, the Siege of Terror. So I will have read at least one other thing from him.
Yeah, although that's
I mean-
not really a story so much as lore information as it was presented.
It does feel like an info dump. Yeah.
I mean, he mentioned in the introduction he basically created Ragnar, and he wrote the fluff for that, like the second edition of Space Wolf Codex.
I've heard it speculated that there was some sort of disagreement going on between King and Black Library. I've not really found anything concrete on it, but apparently there's a bunch of interviews where he just kind of very quickly cuts away from the question when people try and ask why he stopped writing for Black Library. So some people are suspicious about that, which I think is interesting.
Is it because he doesn't take the subject as seriously as they want? Because he seems to have a lot of fun in his books.
I think he
a lot
does
of fun
have a lot
that
of fun.
Black Library
Books
doesn't
are
really seem to have with the rest of it.
I might as well just say this here. His books feel like old pulp fiction. They're like the sort of thing you would have read in the 1950s and the 60s.
Mhm.
Even there's bits of them which remind me of some of L. Ron Hubbard's earliest works. Yes, I've read L. Ron Hubbard. I like to read a lot. And I like suffering.
How dare you? All right. Yeah.
Hey, I've read Mission Earth, and Mission Earth is just so painful to read through that it will drain your sanity.
I don't doubt that one bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know nothing about L. Ron Hubbard, so I probably won't be commenting on that.
You
But
probably,
to go back to
know
your original
something
point,
about
wasn't
L. Ron Hubbard.
well, other than Scientology, that's not really much. To go back to your point about the mythology and the way that it builds into the story, yeah, I really like the way that they managed to slot in. You've got the idea of dying and going to fight in a second life for, but in this case it's Russ, isn't it, as opposed to, Odin's halls, an eternal conflict against. Is it the ice giants that they're fighting in Norse mythology?
I get what you mean. Like, there's analogues from Norse mythology in, like, the tribesman mythology of Fenris.
Yes, and like the fire birds or whatever, they're basically the Thunderhawks or whatever it is, coming down to pick up the dead warriors, to then be revived in the halls afterwards. It's very reminiscent of, say, the Valkyries from Norse mythology, who supposedly take the warriors to the halls.
Yeah, fair enough.
So there's just so many analogs that he manages to fit in. It works so well.
Yeah, there's some things there I want to touch on, but I probably want to save until we're in the spoiler section. But there's some very specific things I found very well done, I thought. On the subject of him feeling very pulpy, I had something I wanted to compare about his writing style. There's one thing I noticed in these books. He quite often gives you information through Ragnar's internal monologue. So rather than showing us how Ragnar is feeling, he will tell us how Ragnar is feeling. I think the last book I read before these that felt like that was Dune. Dune loves to do that, and if you've seen the movies, you'll see it's so prevalent in the book that it's made its way into the movies. You get to sit and see people plot exposit in their monologues. Yeah,
supposedly that's huge in Dune.
That is a very, very big component of pulp fiction and early sci-fi. If you read Robert Heinlein, I mean, most of Starship Troopers is a lot of telling about philosophy, and it's pretty much most of the book.
It's interesting.
It's not
because
bad.
It takes getting used to. It took getting used to for me in Dune, at least. I'll say that. It wasn't quite as bad in this as it was in that. But I find it interesting because on the one hand, they're like, the golden rule is show, don't tell. And when it comes to the character talking, they're not showing us what they think. They're telling us what they think. But in a sense, quite often they're using what the character is thinking to show us something about the world rather than telling us something about the world. So there is sort of that angle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. And the other point is, as well, is that I've seen plenty of authors say that the idea of show don't tell is kind of a cliche and is not necessarily applicable in all situations, and often it will come down to the style of the writing instead. Obviously in a movie it's explicitly more obvious when you're telling the audience something rather than showing them and letting them see and build off.
It's very
scenes.
annoying when you figure something out and then a character immediately turns to another character and explains it to them.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think a bit of that came up in our previous.
Yes, it did.
discussion of the Gaunt's ghosts, but I don't think it comes across quite as clunky as it could in these books.
Mhm.
No, compare it to, again, L. Ron Hubbard. When he does tell, don't show, it's wooden and tedious.
Right. I'll take your word for it. Or
So, so quickly mentioning, I just mentioned Gaunt's Ghost. So, obviously, this is much heavier. Like, in the Gaunt's Ghost books, the first three that I've read so far, he does occasionally tell you things from Gaunt's perspective, and I feel like in these books as well, it's far more heavier, as you were pointing out, but it's interesting because obviously you are getting information from Ragnar's perspective, and there's several times that King will sort of pose a question from Ragnar's perspective, and if you know anything about the 40K universe, you're sitting there going, wow, that's either super naive or you know the answer and you're just like, I wish I could tell him, just tell him the answer because it would save a lot of hassle. Or you're working on an incomplete knowledge, or Ragnar's incomplete knowledge of what has basically been handed to him in his life.
They're not telling us about the world; they're telling us what Ragnar thinks, and that shows us something about the world.
Yes, and it also teaches us more about his character, which is also pretty good character development over the course of the series, I think.
I can agree with that. Like, quite often you see his thought process and get an idea of the kind of person he is. Although sometimes it doesn't work that well. I'll probably come to that in some of the other, as we get into the, probably more in the other books than this one. So I'll leave that for now.
All right.
Yeah. Do we have any other thoughts before we go into spoiler free?
So coming into these books, I just wanted to point out that I had no idea what I was to expect. All I had heard is some absolutely crazy stories that Jimbus had been telling me.
About
and were they real?
Yeah, about Space Wolves. And yes, you're right. Literally every one of them was real. I could scarcely believe it.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
We will get there. We will get there.
That'll be in the spoiler stuff for sure.
That's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. So I think this is probably good for us for spoiler free. So shall we cross the spoiler bridge and go to Spoiler Town?
Can I start?
Go for it.
Ragnar gets fucked. Literally. Two Space Marines who is not a virgin.
Oh, you know what?
I think he's the only Space
somehow I
Marine
knew you were going to bring that up.
Of course I was going to bring it up.
That didn't even occur to me. But yeah, that's true.
I bring it up in line with the recent Master Chief getting laid thing that reminded me of it.
Okay, yeah, because space people typically tend to start their journey to becoming a Space Marine very young, early teens.
Ragnar's what, 12, 13, something like that.
You know what? Yeah, this is yeah. He's already
it's interesting.
So we should, let's talk a little bit about what's happened in the book up to this point.
Yeah, let's actually do that. So we haven't even done the plot, really.
Yeah, but the plot, it's a series of things that happen as he becomes a Space Marine. And I think it's probably, we can just talk about some of these things and comment on them.
It's also how he gets chosen, his life as an ordinary civilian on Fenris.
So first thing I want to say, we start with it's a bit of a bookends type story. So the start of the book is we get to see Ragnar in action as a Space Marine. We get it introduces us to the idea of what a Space Marine is, because this is for somebody who doesn't know anything about 40k. We get to see people around in tanks. We get to see descriptions of how Space Marines operate, like why they're superhuman, what sort of equipment they have. Some of it feels a bit out of place now. Like, for example, I love the grenades, which are like little discs dispensed from a utility belt.
I definitely wanted to bring those up at some point, because those turn up in.
He's got a unique grenade dispenser. He can just tap his wrist and they pop out, which is far more advanced technologically than Space Marines have these days.
Oh yeah, these days you get a Space Marine model
all the time.
Yeah. Oh, constantly. They practically use those grenades more than bolt guns.
Yeah, King seems to love them, and it makes a lot of sense. If you had something this convenient where you could just basically throw like a large supply of massive explosive discs at groups of enemies. He loves using the phrase like the enemies were so clustered that it was impossible to miss when he's like has his space marine shooting,
Firing
which
bolt
means
guns.
that most of the time, clearly they're in a good position for grenades.
Yeah. I mean, that's Space Marines
So
all
it's
over, isn't it? They fight against the overwhelming odds. Or what would otherwise be overwhelming odds.
Yeah, very much. You mentioned the beginning with the tanks, and the fact that you're introduced into a battlefield, basically. It was quite. I thought that was kind of interesting, considering it's supposed to be, and King says in the introduction that it's supposed to be a book for people who haven't read anything to do with 40k before, because you have a lot of concepts like thrown at you immediately. So you have all of the Space Marines, you have like super soldiers as super soldiers, you have tanks, artillery. So you sort of think, okay, these are things I recognize from the regular battle, and then suddenly demon worshippers are just sort of thrown in as well, and you're like, okay, this is
demon
sci-fi in space, but there's demon worshippers suddenly. Okay, that's fine. And then also you get introduced to the main character, who's supposed to be the good guy, but looks somewhat mutated with yellowish dog eyes and fangs, and you're saying like, this is a very interesting sci-fi setting, and I wonder where this is going to go from here.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't assume anything. There's no assumed knowledge in that intro, in my opinion. Like it does. It tells you it is describing things from scratch.
Yes, and I agree with that. It throws a lot of concepts at you, but it doesn't assume that you know what any of them are like in advance. And I just like I wanted to mention something at the end, right at the end of that scene. You get an event that looks like Ragnar has died, right? He's described as being hit by a bolter round, and the bolter round explodes. We've just seen them exploding whenever they're fired. And something really funny is sort of worded. Like I don't know whether this is just my interpretation of the wording or whether the wording is a bit strange, but it says something like it hit him instead of hitting his heart, it exploded inside his chest. I'm sitting there going, well, like if I didn't know what Space Marines were. Is his heart not in his chest?
I thought it like passed through his head or something. Passed through like part of his head, or maybe I don't remember it so well. But exploding in his chest.
It definitely says that
good.
It definitely says it explodes inside his chest.
Okay.
But it almost, I'm sure in the previous line it explicitly says something like missing his heart.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, where is his heart then? And if you don't know anything about these Space Marines and you're being introduced to them for the first time, it's almost like, is this a subtle hint that his heart is somewhere else? What's going on here?
I didn't pick up on that. That's interesting. Yeah, there's a few interesting things there. I think I mentioned there's a few things there which feel a bit off-piste with current 40k setting. One of them is the grenades. Another one is the way one or two things are described. One I remember is he's described as running incredibly fast in spite of his armor, as if the armor's weighing him down, which is like, the armor's helping him run fast. I'm pretty sure that's the idea, or at least it is now.
Although to be fair, that is very much backed up when they actually introduce the armor later on. He does go to like quite a bit of detail of how it's making him faster and making him much stronger, to the point where like something I noticed throughout this story is that he introduced a concept, like a sci-fi concept that is very common to 40k, like ridiculously common, like drop ships or orbital drops and spaceships and warping and all of these things, and he describes them in such detail that I don't think I've ever seen anywhere else. I don't know whether it's because the Horus Heresy books were written quite late, and most of the writers writing Horus Heresy don't seem to go into anywhere near the detail on things like that, because they just assume that people know what they are, and people have seen a warp jump like a billion times at this point, right? Mm-hmm. Why describe them in detail again? But King goes like full into all of these concepts, and I thought it was really good. I like that aspect of it.
You've got to remember, when is King writing this? It's like early 2000s. This is very, very early days for 40k.
Mm-hmm. But also there's the whole aspect of what we said before, which is these are designed for people who don't know about 40k, whereas later on books were not. The Horus Heresy books were absolutely not designed to get people into 40k.
I wonder, how do people get into 40k these days? I don't think they do stuff like Kingswing anymore, where they make books specifically designed to introduce you to the setting.
I know a lot of people.
Actually,
think
that's
what I'm
not entirely
saying-
true.
Hmm.
There is those kiddie books which basically introduce you to the setting, but
Should we
that's
read
a
those one
conversation
day?
for another time. We
know what, let's
totally
discuss
should.
Maybe we
They're
should.
hilarious.
Are these first 40k novels?
Yeah, those
Little
things
Johnny
are...
gets to see his friends get vaporized by a Necron.
But I think so. What I was trying to say though before was not that it's necessarily bad that the other books don't do that, but like I enjoyed
good
that in these
BBC.
books specifically because not only was it good for it's interesting to see somebody describe these in detail, but also because you getting to know the characters and they're all experiencing these events, and you get to see in detail all of their experiences of the events as well, which is really good character development in its own right.
Yeah, I could agree with that. So
Okay,
we have.
so I mean that was.
That's the start.
Yeah, that's the past, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, sorry, the
Well,
future. That's the future, and then
that's
we're
the
like thrown
present.
back into the present. Okay, yeah, fair enough. And then we're thrown back into the past for the entire book.
Yep. So we first off we get to see. It starts off with Ragnar on a ship, doesn't it? So
Yes.
they're on a boat in the Fenrisian seas.
It's a ship, man. It's a dragon boat, a dragon ship. Sorry,
Yeah, it's a dragon ship, which it conjures like some image
It's
of
a
like
longboat.
a Viking longboat or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Viking longboat.
And they have got this passenger who is described as like some sort of mystical warrior, some sort of like
Clad in metal, a metal
yes.
skin.
Yes. They get attacked by a sea serpent, which I love. I love the sea serpent attack, which is again like, hey, like modern and well, I mean generic fantasy elements, but also like the way everything's described in this. It's all a bunch of Vikings. Ragnar's like 12 and deals a serious blow to the sea serpent, and
He throws a spear into its eye, doesn't he?
and
Before,
the metal,
yeah.
And the metal-clad warrior uses his magical icon to banish this creature, aka a bolt gun.
Yeah,
Blasts
and
thing.
we're in. I guess this would be the first introduction of Fenris as a death world, right? Because
Yes.
you see them, they're sailing across the sea, not even like that far into the sea. They're sort of sailing to an island off the coast of like a piece of land, and in the process of doing this, they're coming across like these giant sea dragon monsters that are basically going to eat their ship.
I got the impression it was like a few days journey or something, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's all relative if you're in a relatively slow moving boat. But yeah, no, it probably is a bit further than just an island off the coast, sure. But yeah.
But it's not exactly
but then
crossing the
actually-
Atlantic either.
Yeah, no, but thinking about it, they all live on islands as well. It's almost like the entire
Yeah.
like the entire planet is just like Viking islands.
Well, we're introduced to this. It's like some sort of horrific Icelandic Viking land, which is covered in volcanoes and ice, and they have a hot season where all the volcanoes are going nuts.
Yeah, and in the year of 40k, where there's like space battles going on, and the Space Wolves are all like have their chapter, and everyone has like super technology, at least in space. They've left their homeworld in a state of like Viking medieval dystopia almost. It's a strange
plays on the
recruitment ground.
tropes of the Vikings, given that we know from archaeological evidence that it was nowhere near as bad as endless blood and slaughter. The Vikings are actually very good traders.
Well, we do see an element of that. I mean, obviously, the actual mission they're on right at the beginning is a mission of somewhat trade. I mean, they're being
it's
traded,
an escort, but they're going to a place where they trade.
Yes.
Right. It's the
place where
Isles
they trade,
of Metal or something. Isles of Iron.
The Iron Priests.
No, the Iron Isles or something. Iron Priests are something else. It's the Iron Isles, I think, something like that.
Yeah, but the Iron Priests are the people who live there.
Well,
they're called the Iron Priests. I wrote it down here.
Okay, I don't. Okay, well, there are Iron Priests. I didn't think Iron Priests is what they described those people living there as. Iron Priests are like a Space Wolf rank.
They're also on Fenris in a different context. A bit like how a lot of 40k terms are like used by the Fenrisians. Slana, Hess, the Dark God Horus, etc., etc.
Yes, I noticed that he says when they're sailing towards this island, Ragnar is talking to the old man in the metal skin, and he says something like, "Isn't one of the ancient evils? I think the first one is Gorg or Gorge or something like that, and Slana Hesh." And I was like, that sounds oddly familiar. clearly they know something of the universe.
Or it's deliberately fed into them to make it easier for them to acclimatize when they learn the truth.
Yes, well, that would be the easiest explanation. Yeah, definitely.
There are hints that they actually, especially when the Grimskulls come in and they're talking about, we get to see a little bit of back and forth between the clans, how they think. I think there is at some point, there's talk about the idea of chaos and things being mutated by dark forces. So there is like some basic understanding of what chaos is and that it is bad.
They definitely know about. Yes, they definitely know about the mutations because at one point someone mentions mutated children or something, or they get checked. They get like basically a medical exam when they get to the space wolf, space wolves, yeah. And
get to
Ragnar says, as if we would be mutated. Mutated children get drowned at birth. And it's like, okay, clearly they know about mutation. They have a very Spartan policy to it.
Yeah. So they drop this guy off. He gets in his Thunderbird and leaves. There's
Thunderbird too.
He talks to Ragnar a lot, though. Because he they get a bit of a friendship. He sort of gives a bit of information to Ragnar. He sort of answers a few of his questions, and
then he says something like,
him by the scene of it.
And then he says something like, "If you're lucky, you'll never see me again." Foreshadowing.
Yes. Well, he even says something like, "If you do see me again, it will spell your doom," or something like that.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, something very, very ominous. Yeah.
So they get back from that. They have their party to celebrate. It's like celebrating when they took over this island from the Grimskulls, like centuries ago or something, right? Or decades.
Yeah. So, sorry. Before we get to that quickly, can I get your take on who is actually on that island? So the people they go to visit, the Iron Priests, as they're called, who are they?
I thought it was
clan
just
of metal workers.
Yeah, that's what I got the impression of. Just a more. So I got the idea it's some more technologically advanced tribes on Fenris, but still a tribe on Fenris. I remember I thought just metal workers, but I remember at some point later on, it references something in the Fang and says it reminded them of the Iron Isles. So I do think they're a little more technologically advanced than the rest.
So I didn't know what they were at the beginning. I thought maybe they were like undercover kind of, at least people working with the Space Wolves. Something later on, as you said, when they get to the Fang and he remembers seeing something, made me think that maybe these Iron Priests were tech priests in some form, or some form of tech priests, because it's the tech priests that remind him of the Iron Workers.
So
the Iron Priests, on this island.
Iron Priests in Space Wolves are tech priests. I still don't remember them calling the denizens of the Iron Isles Iron Priests, but Iron Priests in Space Wolves are tech priests. Yeah.
That would make an awful lot of sense with what happened, with what he says later on.
Yeah. So they're back home. It like skips forward to them being home and they're partying to celebrate having taken the Isles. The Thunderfist clan is partying, celebrating having taken the Isles from the Grimskulls. Meanwhile, we're cutting back to the Grimskulls who are like, yes, on the anniversary, we are going to take back our land from these despicable Thunderfist tribesmen who wronged us. It shows us a bit of like the different cultural attitudes between them, and it definitely paints a harsher picture of the Grimskulls. But they do have a bit of a legitimate grievance here.
So it's the sort of it's a very interesting dichotomy because you sort of get the setup of obviously they both have completely differing opinions on what actually happened at that event, but to an extent it's the same. It's obviously the same event. They're just seeing it from obviously different perspectives.
I don't think they have that obviously different perspectives. I think the perspective was we attacked the island and conquered it and now it's ours.
Yes, but the Greyskulls are like, we were away from our home and they attacked our home that was unprotected, and then we got back and found that they had taken the island and defended it against us. And so it was like the Greyskulls sort of saw it as like a betrayal and a backstabbing almost, whereas the Thunder Fists were like, we took this island in combat, and it's a very different perspectives on the same event. And
both of you are forgetting the most important part of the whole chapter. Ragnar getting laid.
Well, I was getting to that.
Oh, we haven't got there yet.
Wait, they are, it's a wild party. 12-year-old Ragnar sees 12-year-old other tribesmen, and they go, you know what?
Or 13,
Everybody else
I
is
don't know.
busy.
It's one of the two.
You know what? They're something. They're around that age. They're at. I don't think it's ever explicitly stated what age Ragnar is, but it's implied he's fairly young. He's like just hitting puberty or something, and you need to be young to become a space wolf, to become a space marine. So it's implied.
Well, it's
Like,
So here's the thing. I
you know,
mean, historically speaking, back in those days, people were having sex at a very young age because they didn't exactly live very long.
yeah.
I mean, I think the average age of giving birth in like those very early periods was anywhere between 13 to about 16.
So something
it's
I
not-
wanted to mention regarding that, because they very explicitly say something kind of strange in the chapter before this. Actually, the old man, while he's talking to the old man, and the old man mentions that he's like 500 years old or whatever, and Ragnar's just like, what the fuck? Because he says then, no man of Fenris lives past 35, not even the oldest greybeards. And I was sitting there going, 35?
Death Worlds.
That is young.
Death Worlds.
That is very young.
So
Also, that completely contradicts something that is said later on when they talk about, I think it's the second book, when they talk about it being 70 being like the sort of age, which was very weird, I found. Maybe he thought the 35 was actually a bit young, even for a death world.
So, I want to make a comment here, which is that when I was reading it, Ragnar at no point acted like a 12-year-old. For better or for worse, we don't have to read about a 12-year-old mindset for the first few chapters of this book. So when I read that, I got the impression like it's written as if like, oh, teenager at a party going off to get laid. It did not occur to me at all that they're young. And then I was like, oh, I feel a bit like icky about it now that you pointed it out. But you know, you are right that they, actually,
the mindset would be different. I mean,
Well,
they're practically an adult at that point.
maybe there are some. I mean,
they were talking
important
about
things
him
to
being
remember that happened later, though.
They were talking about him having become a man and stuff there, weren't they, in the ceremony?
Yeah.
Yes,
And-
but also I somehow doubt that he was actually 12 or 13 based on what happens next, though. Because right after this, there's a massive fight, and he takes on and kills multiple completely grown men Vikings.
He kills like 20 people.
If he was actually 12 or 13, this seems incredibly unlikely, because he would have like started puberty maybe by like a year or two. There's almost no way that he'd be in a position to be able to fight like fully grown Vikings. That seems beyond silly. So I feel like he's probably older than we're talking about.
Okay, I'm happy if he's like, like 14, 15 maybe? I don't know.
At least, yeah, I'd say like at least.
The thing is, once you get to like 14, 15, you're starting to stretch the age where he can become a space marine.
Well, in current
because
law.
they really do need to get them earlier in order to try and get them before it's all fully set in.
I mean, there is so one of the Horus Heresy books, aren't there like older men that also get given? It's just less likely to take effect.
They
right?
are
Obviously,
not actually space marines. They are given
They
like
just get
you get to pretend
weird medical
treatment.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. He's somewhere in that
based
sort of
based
like
on the fights.
It's somewhere around puberty, I think, is the idea.
Based on the fights that they have later, I disagree. I think he must have gone through puberty significantly earlier, because
I get
there's
the
no way he's
impression
fighting
that
grown men otherwise.
Oh, he could be. I mean, who knows? Maybe he's just quicker than they are because he's young and spry, or any one of a number of reasons.
I guess he is shown to be a berserker. They do even at this stage kind of suggest that he goes into like a berserker rage almost.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're fighting, and the slaughter of the Thunderfist stops because the choosers of the gods, aka the Space Wolves,
Choosers of the Slain.
choosers of the slain,
the
right.
Thunderhawk turns up.
Yes, and they go to observe the fights to pick people out, and the two narrative viewpoints we've had. This was a interesting twist for me. The two narrative viewpoints from the Thunderfist and the Grimskulls both get selected. They are both excellent fighters and both get pulled through to become Space Wolves.
Well, so they end up having so it goes from being the Greyskulls ambushing kind of the Thunderfist while they're drunk and completely the Grimskulls, and completely the Greyskulls completely massacring them. And then He-Man turns up. Sorry. Yeah. Then the Thunderfists are basically dead. Like they've lost like half the numbers already.
The
and
tribe
then
is basically wiped out.
Yeah, and then the choosers turn up, and suddenly even the Grimskulls are like, okay, hold on, we should make this a more even fight because this is our chance to show our mettle, basically, to the choosers.
Yep.
So they back up then, and they let everyone get in position, and then you end up with this actual crazy fight between two sides that are properly armed, and then a duel between the two viewpoints, which is Ragnar Thunderfist and Scrimgeour
Styrbjörn. Styrbjörn. I believe.
Styrbjörn? I don't know, I can't pronounce it. but yes, and then they duel and they kill each other. Like they both throw an axe or something at each other's chests and then they both die. And then, as you said, they're both chosen.
Styrbjörn. Yeah. Yeah, they are both chosen.
Styrbjörn.
They are he's like brought back from the brink of death, tries to kill Styrbjörn and is stopped because Styrbjörn is also being brought back from the brink of death, and they get taken away to the Fang.
Yes.
So, yeah, we get to see that. Up until this point, we've gotten to see how is life on Fenris before you become, if you are not a Space Marine, and it's quite brutal. They talk a little bit about the sort of things that are out in the wild. We get to see a sea serpent. It mentions krakens, I believe. I think it mentions
two other things it mentions.
Okay.
Trolls and Nightgangers.
Yes, mentions a lot of things there. We'll come back to those.
It mentions
later.
two things, almost as if it's setting up for something.
I think it also mentions at some point that the moon has a wolf on it, which is very silly.
Wait, did it say that? I don't remember that.
I believe it does.
That would be incredible.
Even 20 years ago, they couldn't help just putting wolves on everything.
That would be amazing. Yeah, that would be amazing.
So much worse.
Well, it's mostly worse now, but they don't have like a moon. Well, you know what? They probably haven't retconned the moon with a wolf on it. It probably still is there.
What's going to be interesting, though, is comparing the way we see Fenris here to the way we see Fenris on the ground in later books.
I've not read many books set in Fenris, so that will be interesting, I'm sure.
There is a big chunk of Prospero Burn set on Fenris itself.
Oh, there is that, yeah. I mean, there's a few heresy ones, but that's not the same as like 40k Fenris.
So I just remember them all being icy wastes in those books.
Yeah.
So I liked I really like this setup. It's such a good setup, and it's kind of weird because it's almost like some sort of bizarre Viking Hunger Games, all set up by the Space Wolves to kind of get the champions that they were going to induct into the Space Wolf faction. It's a very bizarre concept if you think about it. Really, because they're in the 42nd millennia. Is it the 42nd?
41st would be.
It's the 42nd.
41st.
The 41st. Okay, fair enough.
Might be 40th depending on this. Yeah, no, it's 41st. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Okay, I never really know when these books are like set. I thought this might have been a bit later on in the sort of the 40k sort of setting, but anyway, they're in this like age of technology, right, with space travel and all this shit, and they've got their home planet where they pull all of their people from, in this sort of like perpetual state of medieval technology. And they even have like tech priests living on the surface if these Iron Priests are tech priests, and it's so bizarre. Like think of all the crazy.
Yeah, a lot of worlds do that in 40k. I think Fenris in particular, yeah, a lot of them like to basically keep conditions that breed hardy folk. They want survival of the fittest in full effect for the people they're choosing aspirants from. Some other ones that come to mind, something else that's similar, the Iron Hand's homeworld of Medusa. They aren't like low technology, but they encourage the different clans on that world to war to keep them strong and recruit from them.
Okay.
There's some things like that. A lot of worlds have some sort of like encouraged animosity, and a lot of them have really brutal trials as well. The Doom Eagles come to mind. Basically, it's a series of like extremely harsh, like demoralizing challenges, and they only select people at the end if they've actually given up all hope. There's some very silly things like that.
So they have to break you before that they will accept you into their ranks.
Yeah, basically.
Oh, weird. I mean,
you have to have a fatalistic view.
I thought it was such an interesting concept that, yeah, I definitely really liked the beginning of this book.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of some books later on, which you said I'm not allowed to talk about, but
we've got all of this happens. Then the actual aspirant process begins. If I remember right, the first step is the Canis Helix. once they arrive.
Wasn't the first step the?
Oh wait, no, boot camp. First they have boot camp.
Yeah, they have boot camp. Then they have the gate of whatever the hell it's called, gate of Mordecai or something like that.
The gate of Mordecai. Yes. All right.
Which
so
is basically
camp,
a bunch of psychers like destroying your mind or something like that.
Testing you, but yeah. All right. So first up, boot camp. They end up at this. What is the boot camp called? Jimbus, do you remember?
Russia. It's called Russia or something like that.
Ruska.
I would look it up.
I think it's Ruska or something like that. It's such a
it's something like that. Yeah.
It's related to Rus. It's a very generic name that I kept like forgetting constantly what the actual name of it was while I was reading. It's like what's the place?
Isn't it like Rustown or Rus something like that, but in Nordic? So it's like Ruskava.
It's not. I don't know. Not Nordic, I don't think. Or not in modern Nordic conventions.
Oh,
yeah,
I don't know. You speak Swedish, right? So is it? Who knows? Well, if anyone is going to, it'll be you.
It's just some generic Rus themed name, I think. But yeah, boot camp. They have their sergeant who's a hard ass. They get put through horrific challenges, and one of those challenges involves them going out as a group to find food in the wilderness. They're only allowed to come back once they've hunted and made a kill, or one of their team dies.
Yeah, although
you're right.
We do find out that they can.
Rusvik. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Close enough to Russia.
And
so,
right.
Although we do find out though that there is the side cheat way where you can go fishing and come back with some fish, which counts as meat, and you're fine.
Bit low energy.
They sort of. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, Ragnar says that his entire group agrees not to take that cheating way out by like unspoken consent. They're just like, they see the river, they go, we could go fishing, but we're not going to do that. That would be lazy, right? We're going to go hunt a deer or something.
Maybe they just really don't like fish.
Like every other group fishes every time. I've just had enough of fish at this point.
We've come from a fishing tribe. You know what? I've had fish all my life.
We spent all our lives on an island. All there is fish.
And this is where they find a troll. And the troll...
Well, the troll finds them.
Yes. I loved the description of the troll and the fight against the troll. So the troll, to me, is like a great example of this fusion of like fantasy and folklore, Norse mythology and stuff, and also like the 40k setting. So there's a few different
thing.
Go on.
The way the troll is described is literally lifted out of Warhammer Fantasy. It's got the bucket jaw. It's got the protruding ears.
Well, that's like
literally
the very
troll. The
very basic like physical descriptions. Okay, but that's interesting. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Well, it makes sense. I mean,
yeah.
William King wrote, I believe, Troll Slayer. I think that was the first Gotrek and Felix. So. It makes perfect sense. The troll there would be lifted out Troll Slayer.
So the things that come to mind for me when I think about why I love the description are not things like those physical things like that. They are more things like you've got your modern fantasy elements of things like when it regenerates unless you burn it. You got that sort of thing. You've got folklore.
Yeah, almost a magic level of regeneration, isn't it?
Yep. You've got folklore themes going on with like how it behaves, and like it reminds me of trolls. Is like in older folklore, troll can mean a lot of things, but it's the sort of thing as like the Grendel in Beowulf is sort of a troll. Is that sort of folklore entity, and it reminded me a bit of that because he does actually leave and just walk off into the lake to his home, which is hidden under a lake.
Apparently they just live under the water.
Yeah. And a lot of like folklore is tied to things to water. A lot of folklore ties things to water in some way. You've also got
especially Scandinavian folklore, I'd imagine, because
other folklore
they spend
as
most
well.
Of the time on the water like that.
There's a lot of most countries have got a lot of folklore like around things in water. Like you've got British folklore, you've got things like Kelpies, or even like Beowulf. That Grendel comes
the
from
Lady of the Lake that gives Arthur his sword.
Yeah, like even like things like Japanese stuff. You've got like the Kappa. You've got all sorts of like folklore water entities. Folklore loves to fuck with water.
All right, you've convinced me. I believe you.
As for like the Nordic elements, though, you've got all this talk about like dark spirits and things, which sort of feels evocative of like Norse themes. There's a lot of the ways it actually describes the horrors out in the wild, and the way they have their superstitions about them feels like it's got something from Nordic folklore. But then also, you've got stuff which has almost like a chaos vibe. They talk about, I can't remember exactly what it said, but there was something about it that was described like it's some sort of horrific, ungodly chaos mutation about the creature.
Honestly, all I remember about the troll is that they described it as having giant bat ears, and I was just like, that's all I remember now, is the giant bat ears.
I really like
I know initially when they were describing the troll, I remember thinking, is this going to be like an orc or something that somehow like ended up on this place? And I was like, that'd be a very strange way to start this. But due to some things that Jimbus had already like told me about the stories, I was expecting an orc to turn up at some point. But yeah, I didn't think it would be quite that early on. But yeah, and then it was like the bat ears, and I was like, this doesn't sound like an orc.
In fact,
I think you're absolutely right, though.
Some of the description made me think of like a chaos spawn or something. But yeah.
Okay. Was it like lumpy or I don't remember exactly. I don't remember much of the description, but like
I don't remember too much detail. But yeah, it
is literally a fantasy troll in every single respect.
Sure, but there's like
I think you're probably spot on there.
But like even if it fits that description, you've got like how it behaves, the whole context of it, the way they view the creature. Like all of it comes together really nicely, in my opinion.
Yeah. But I think what you're saying about
that's interesting to know as well, that it is like there's another element that's tied in there as well, which is just literally Warhammer Fantasy. So yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about like the Norse mythology and stuff. I don't think there's much folklore / mythology that really would fit into 40k quite as well as the Nordic one does, especially with this specific setting with Fenris and like the Space Wolves. It just seems to fit so well that it just it's almost mind blowing in the way that it sets up.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they fight the troll.
Yeah, they make it out.
One of their number, one of their number becomes very overconfident almost immediately, and almost out of nowhere as well. He's like, "I'm going to kill this troll," and he starts fighting, and you sort of immediately know.
He's very abruptly he just bites his head off and then takes the body and walks off into the lake. Like, oh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just as abruptly as he suddenly gains this overconfidence, he just as abruptly dies.
Yeah.
And Ragnar gets his first taste of
loss.
This is what actually happens. You know, if you end up in a fight, this can easily happen at any moment.
Yeah. Is there anything else notable about boot camp?
He gets his first taste of being a leader, which is that endeavor.
Yeah. Okay, that's true. Also, I guess,
and this is kind of important to his character.
Yeah. And I guess kind of related to that is that we've still got like his conflict going on with his rivalry with Strebjorn.
Almost to an annoying degree. Like he doesn't shut up about it. It's like it's all he thinks about, because we're inside Ragnar's head. We can't stop thinking about it as well.
We are party to his obsession.
Like every chapter, there's like an entire paragraph about how much he hates him and his plans to kill him.
God, I can't wait for him to die. God, I can't wait for this guy to die. Not now, but later.
He's like in the middle. He's in the middle of fighting a troll, and he's like, "Do I let the troll eat him now, or do I?" It's just like, what? God damn it, Ragnar! Just fucking deal with your shit outside of like life-threatening combat, please.
So they get done there, and then they go to the Fang.
Yes, or they have the gate of Mordkai.
But that's at the Fang. That's at the Fang. That's
yes, but that's like that's their introduction, isn't it, to like to that area?
Yeah. So I think is that the first thing once they arrive at the Fang, and then they get the Canis Helix.
Then they get the Canis Helix, and this kind of confused the hell out of me.
Right. Well, do you have anything you want to say about the Gate of Mordkai first?
So the three old men, the terrible old men that are clearly psychers.
Yes.
In a legion that hates psychers.
Oh, this isn't 30k anymore, Abraham. Everybody's psychers are fine again. And
don't bring in things from much later books. A lot of lore has changed in the 20 years after this was published.
Yeah, at this point, psychers were just fine, and to be honest, they still are in 40k.
Okay, so the Space Wolves have got over their absolute hatred of psychers, and now they're fine.
And they never counted.
Now they have psychers. Yeah, now they have very obvious psychers in their own chapters. And he gets to see everything. So we see something that looks like Tyranids. We see something that looks like an Elder, maybe even an Avatar. I couldn't tell whether it was an Avatar or something like that. It did seem to be red and giant or some bullshit like that. But it definitely was described like an Eldar. Maybe it's a race lord or something like that.
He gets put through a bunch of scenarios mentally to see how he handles them.
Yes. And he fails one of them.
Well, he almost fails one of them, didn't he? He
and of course it's
he averts it at the last second.
pretty sure the one he fails is yes, the one with
the one with Grimskull. That's the one. Yeah.
The one with Grimskull, yeah.
The one that he hasn't shut up about for the entire book so far.
Yeah. If I remember right, Stubern, he's basically told you can have whatever you want, and what he wants is Stubern dead, and he kind of he is thinking yes, and then ends up changing his mind, I believe.
Yes, I think you're right there. And this is a priest of Sinch or something, because he basically sees all of the different chaos worshippers too. He meets a bunch of
every different aspect of
Khornite chaos warriors at the beginning, and that's the first challenge. Yeah, and he meets a bunch of different. Oh, and he he makes out with some Slaneshi priest or something. It's a very strange trip that he has.
Yeah.
So we get to see a bunch of these things for the first time ever, though, right? Because if this is supposedly an introduction to the 40k world, all of these visions of enemies of the Imperium we've never seen before, and we don't know anything about them, and we don't know what they are. These are all very strange visions, in a very quick succession.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cup.
Yeah. So the whole Stubern thing is actually addressed by those rune priests as well. They warn him you got to get over this, boy. It's going to cause issues for you.
They're you almost failed. You were so close. We almost killed you.
Yeah. But he passes, and then they have the Canis Helix. So the Canis Helix comes with its own little mythology blurb first, doesn't it? About how it's there to root out. They tell this story about its past.
To root out the Wolfen, isn't it?
It's to root out the Wolfen.
The Wolfen.
Because the Wolfen is like a manifestation of evil or something, and if you actually have evil in your heart, then it'll come forth as the Wolfen. And if you don't, you'll come out the other side stronger instead. Is the idea. And they have this little story about the first person Ross gave the Canis Helix to, who had been a former rival that he'd made peace with, and then actually it revealed that this guy actually secretly still hated Ross, and he turned into a Wolfen.
Immediately. It happened instantaneously.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is
and we find out.
I'm pretty sure it's just their own little made up little story for aspirants. But hey, who knows?
Yes, and Ragnar comes to the same conclusion later on because of the way that he reacts to the thing. But this was a very strange thing to me, because I didn't know anything about this, and I was sitting there going, "How old is the story? How much of the lore is different? Is this supposed to be in place of the gene seed?" I was like, how does this work? Is this how they create the Space Marines? Because he's described after taking this as getting stronger, getting faster, he bulks up, he starts to look like the other Space Marines, and I was like, this is weird. Do they not have the gene seed in this story? Is this not a thing?
So
gene seed is the last thing they implement, isn't it?
So the gene seed does come later.
Gene seed comes in different, the gene seed stuff comes in different parts, doesn't it? The modifications. It's yeah. Let me think. I could pull up a list, but
I've always thought the gene seed was a term for the progenitors, which means it's literally the very last thing they implant.
Yeah, true.
I'm not sure. It's described when he gets it later on. It's described as being the controller. It's the thing that controls all of the other implants and makes them work. That's how Ragnar is told, or it's described to Ragnar when he's getting the gene seed implanted.
That's kind of how I've always viewed it. Yeah. So the Canis Helix, Obrium, is a Space Wolf thing, and it still is. All Space Wolves, I believe, the Space Wolf gene seed needs the Canis Helix to function properly, if I remember right. I don't think it's just an optional thing that they choose to do. Although I'm sure if it was, they would still choose to do it. I believe it is actually mandatory as part of making their gene seed work properly.
Okay, so it's a very weird thing to be mandatory for such a cut and dry uptight faction as I know them, considering what it does to them.
Right. And the Wolfen are a secret the Space Wolves keep.
So I know the phrase, "There are no wolves on Fenris."
Yes.
Now, that is such a bullshit phrase in so many senses, because there are wolves on Fenris. There are
That's-
plenty of wolves on Fenris.
Yeah.
And they're not space wolves. Like, it's not a joke. It's not like an ominous insinuation that all of the wolves are secretly space wolves, which is what I thought it was originally, because there are actual wolves on Fenris. In fact, they have dogs as well, and the dogs were clearly not bred from space wolves that had somehow turned into wolves.
Yeah, but
It's clearly actual dogs that came from actual wolves that are on Fenris.
Or did they?
There's the whole can of worms that we can kick down the road for another time.
Yeah.
Well, we
You know what?
actually
Yeah,
get to
let's do that.
see what happens. We get to see plenty of things that, like, plenty of examples of what happens when they fail the Canis Helix,
Yes.
and we get to see someone turn into a wolfen,
Yes.
right? And it is not a wolf.
Oh,
It
well,
is
wolfen-
a man wolf,
Wolfen
like a
exists.
werewolf.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yes.
But the
Wolfen
interesting
exists.
thing is, this is before Wolfen became a model on the battlefield, which was the Eye of Terror campaign. It was like 2003.
Oh, okay.
So it's interesting to see the Wolfen here and then realize what they make of the Wolfen further down the track.
I didn't realize that they didn't actually, because I know they always talk about how anybody can become a Wolfen at any point after this if they lose control. They do talk about that. But I actually didn't realize Wolfen weren't a model yet at this point. That's interesting.
They weren't, well, in this book, when you become a Wolfen, you're basically a mindless
You're a
berserker,
werewolf.
whereas
Oh, yeah, that's
the Wolfen
true.
we see in like the Eye of Terror or later on, they have some semblance of the ability to go and kill enemies.
Well, I mean, the wolfen we see in the story is not completely lost, because after Ragnar slays him, the wolfen basically says his name, and like he recognizes his friend in the wolfen.
He is basically lost, though.
He is basically lost, and he is somewhat mindless, but he is also not completely, completely gone. He is there somewhere.
Well, you're not going to give him a pair of frost claws and throw him at nearest Chaos Worshipper, are you?
No.
I don't know. I was very confused by this entire thing because, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so
Knowing as little as I do about Space Wolves, this just all seemed very strange.
yeah, Space Wolves do have their eccentricities. Wolfen being chief among them. Wolfen exist. They've existed, and they're not new to the 40k setting either. In terms of like the 40k timeline, they've always been a thing for Space Wolves.
Well, I mean, if they take out 1,000 Suns for going too close to the heresy line, they definitely should be taken out for going too close to the mutant line.
You have not read all heresy books. I'm just going to say that.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, they Wolfen are a thing, and this is a uncontrolled Wolfen who's just mutated and goes berserk, and these things litter the area outside of the Fang from failed aspirants. Yep.
Yeah, it's yeah, okay. That's a weird scene, and it brings a lot of questions that I don't think I'm ever going to get answers to within this series, at least.
Fair enough.
Mainly because I think a lot of it is undecided currently. At least when these books were written, I think lots of this was just like they didn't know yet what they were going to do with these things.
Well, it sounds like it. It sounds like if they didn't have Wolfen as a model, like as a Space Wolf army feature at this point, that's quite interesting to know.
Well, even when Wolfen became an army feature, they were specifically for the 13th Company, who'd been the Eye of Terror for like 10,000 years.
Okay. So there's the next interesting thing that kind of threw up some questions for me is the crown of knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the way the Space Wolves present hypno-indoctrination.
Yes. I was going to say it is knowledge, but also brainwashing. Lots and lots of brainwashing.
And they even know it's brainwashing, basically.
Yeah. Ragnar is very much aware that he's being brainwashed.
Yep. He's okay with that because he knows.
So yeah, they basically get knowledge of like the Empire, knowledge of the Empire's enemies, knowledge of like history and everything. It's just pumped into his brain, and alongside that, Ragnar is like, yeah, and for some reason, I just feel an awful lot better about these Space Wolf guys, and I feel a lot more loyalty and stuff to the chapter.
And I really hate chaos.
Yeah, and I really, really hate chaos. Yeah, I those are interesting because I don't know if I've seen those in anything else.
So
do they come up at all in Horus Heresy much?
I don't think so.
No.
At best, I'm trying to think what a close. Yeah, you know what? Let's not worry about that. I think not really. I don't think it comes up much anywhere. Like generally, it's you get hypno indoctrination, you don't. It's not really what does that actually mean in real terms. It's not normally gone into much detail, and here it does. It's the crown of knowledge. You sit and have it on your head.
Yeah. So it was about this point when we see all of the shit that he is going through regarding the Wolfen change and all that shit, and he's learning to suppress the beast and live with the beast and control it and only unleash it when he wants to, which is sort of takes the place of his berserker rage almost now from this point on in the story. But it's about this point where I was thinking, why do they turn? Like, why do they risk all of this? Why do they turn all of their people into these mutated, like, monster space marines? And I mean, one of the reasons is probably, as you said, where they have to have the Canis Helix to be able to use the gene seed of Russ. The second one is that it gives them superpowers.
Yes.
Now, this is the only time I've ever seen this from the Space Marines, but it is so broken. Like, several people later on in the story actually voice my own concerns, which is just like, why do the Inquisitors not do something like this? Why does like anyone else not do something like this? This is it basically through smell they can tell what the other person is thinking almost. Like later on, Ragnar is able to communicate almost wordlessly through smell with his entire group and all of his squad mates, and can tell what like regular mortals are thinking practically. He's like a super lie detector.
Why do you think the Space Wolves are being accused of being a Mary Sue chapter? Because they have all these things that they alone can do. The Archangels can't do that.
I
it is
only
insanely
heard them,
powerful.
I don't think I've generally heard them accused of being a Mary Sue chapter. That's normally the Ultramarines, I think.
No, Space Wolves are accused of being a Mary Sue chapter long before the Ultramarines had their big, their fun little period in 5th edition.
Fair enough. All right. Yeah, I mean, if they were, that makes sense. I get it.
Yeah, it's just a very strong power, like a super strong power.
Mm-hmm.
So now, and then, like towards the end of the story, I guess we see, we get to see some chaos. Some chaos. This is the first enemy that he's going to encounter in his career as a Space Wolf.
I've got a note here.
Be right on his doorstep.
I've got a note here before the chaos stuff, which is an interesting one. The note says theoretical versus practical. I thought it was very interesting.
Any more?
I thought it was very interesting that at some point it describes the Space Wolves thinking about scenarios in terms of the theoretical versus the practical. I thought that was very interesting.
Isn't that a very Ultramarine kind of?
It's a very Heresy-era Ultramarine thing.
What? Well, the thing is, Abner is the one who created that. I would not be surprised if he didn't spot it in this book and choose to adapt it for something else. I could well imagine him doing that.
Yeah. I have never seen that outside of Heresy era Ultramarines, where they have like this like autistic focus on doing that.
Yes, they use those words as well. Like they call them practicals and they call them theoreticals.
Yeah, and they did that here. Like,
yeah.
It's like one paragraph. Someone talks about the theoretical as this, but the practical is this. And I thought, hang on a minute, I've seen those words before.
That language sounds very Ultramarine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got some notes on the Chaos Marines as well.
Yes. So as they're approaching these Chaos Marines, they're going through this cave, aren't they? And
should you explain? I mean, just suddenly these Chaos Marines show up. Should we not explain how?
Oh yeah, there's the meteor.
Happened?
There's the meteor, and they go to investigate. And the first party that goes to investigate disappears. So the second party goes to investigate, and the second party is headed up by. It's not headed up by Ragnar. It's headed up by the
Sergeant Hengist.
So yes, Hengist,
named after the legendary figure in Saxon mythology. Well, Saxon folklore. The Saxon who founded the kingdoms of Britain. In Britain.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, Hengist and Horsa, the brothers who, in old folk tales, are the first Saxons to come to Britannia.
That's cool.
That's actually, you know what? That's a thought. The guy who ends up being their sergeant in the next book.
Hakon.
Yeah.
Hakon, I believe.
Hakon, let's say. What was his... He had a role in this book as well, didn't he? But I can't remember what.
He did. He was a training sergeant. He trained them.
Who was Hengist again, then?
Hengist is a different... I think he's like a line marine.
I thought he was the other training sergeant, because they had one training sergeant in Russia, or Rusvik, and they had another training sergeant when they got to the Fang, right? And I thought one of them was Hengist and one of them was Hakon.
Okay.
I like his was it one of the aspirants accidentally blew himself up with his own crack?
One of them
Yeah.
blew,
Did the
blew
other
himself
one?
up, like cleaning his gun.
One of the others blew his head off while cleaning his gun, which is disturbing.
And the
Survival
one
of the
who
fittest.
just randomly died. He was just sitting there eating. He just fell over and died.
Yeah,
Just-
couldn't handle a Canis Helix or whatever.
So that was
Suffering
that was
from
actually that was actually the introduction. So the guy blowing his head off with the pistol was actually an introduction and explained by
I
Ragnar
wonder
as
if that was a Starship Troopers a movie, Verhoeven's movie, a reference to that. Was
with the
famous
grenade.
seeing that thing. No, blowing his head off with the gun.
Well, he
Oh,
didn't
okay,
blow his
yeah,
own head
yeah,
off,
fair
did he? His helmet wasn't working. Oh, wait, or did he?
Yeah, he did. He blew his own head off.
Huh.
And so that the Ragnar
No,
explains it as
she,
being like,
the woman blew his head off when his helmet wasn't working.
Yeah.
Now, talking about helmets not working, it's something I think you're going to talk about later, right, Obrium?
oh, I'm going to talk about the helmet problem a lot.
So, well,
I thought so.
So
before we-
no, I was going to say, like, Ragnar introduces the idea that while they have all this information, they know exactly how the guns work, they know how to clean them, they know how they function perfectly. They don't
some
don't
people aren't as quick
understand
on the uptake
the
as
knowledge,
others. Yeah.
but also no, but they don't have any of the experience. So it's like being told this is how a car works, but you don't understand the
You don't know how to
ramifications
drive.
of using the car.
Yeah.
You may know how to drive, but you don't know what the weight of it is. So you might you're going to hit things, and when you're moving, and you're not going to realize how much force you're applying to things because you don't have the respect for the actual 2 tons of vehicle that you're moving around, basically. It's the same for the guns in this case. Like they know how they operate, but they don't respect them as actual like death weapons that they are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I had a question as well that came from, and I think I answered this question, but I'm going to see whether you guys have an immediate answer as well. Why is Ragnar only ever shown as using a pistol? Why does everyone we see here, except for much later on, why is everyone using a pistol?
Okay, Space
Because
Wolves.
that's what Blood Claws use. Their main
Yeah,
weapon.
that's what I was going to say. So I'm not as familiar with Space Wolves as the other chapters because they work a little bit differently. But Space Wolves, you know what? Before we go into that, I want to ask you, Obrium, what's your understanding of Space Wolf ranks? Can you name some different
at this
Space
point
Wolf
in the
ranks?
story?
Yeah.
So at this point in the story, I had no
generally.
idea.
Generally, sure, okay.
So
You had no
after
idea
having
about.
read all 3,
Yep. on.
Bloodclaw is like their basic rank
Yep.
after the aspirants.
Yep.
Then you have Grey Walkers or Grey Beards or something
Grey
like
Hunters.
that. I can't remember what it's called. Grey Hunters. That's it. It's literally the name of the 3rd book. Yeah, Grey Hunters.
Yep.
That's the one. Long Fangs, would be like the sort of the ancients that use heavy weapons for some reason.
Yep.
Yeah,
Well,
like they give all the
seniority
old
gives you-
senile people heavy weapons.
Seniority gives you the
but-
responsibility to use a rocket launcher.
Yes, basically
Okay.
either that or like they just like give the old man the rocket launcher. If he blows himself up, it doesn't matter too much.
So we're not
and then
we're not
have-
introduced to those ranks so much yet at this point, but we are introduced to
We haven't
some
seen
other
any
roles.
of these yet.
But we are introduced to some other roles within the Fang, within the Space Wolves in the first book. Can you think of a few?
Okay,
so
so
we've covered one, which is the
and
Iron Priest.
We've got Wolf Lords, which are like the sort of the captain level.
Yep.
We've got Wolf Lords, and then you've got the Great Wolf, who is like the
Chapter
big
Master.
bad leader of Chapter Master. Yeah.
So we covered Iron Priests, which are like tech priests.
Yes, we meet them again. But they're called. Are they still called? They're not called Tech Priests. They're still called Iron Priests, right? When they meet them in the Fang as well, right?
Yep, they are Iron Priests. Like that is the tech priest rank. If you're a Space Wolf, is called an Iron Priest. Or was it an Iron Wolf? It's Iron Priest, isn't it?
I think it's Iron Priest.
Okay, well, you've got, and there's 2 other types of Space Wolf priest rank.
Well, you've got the Sfold. The Sfolds were like, the Viking kind of knowledge man, storyteller kind of character.
Well, we have there's a Skald in the first bit before they become Space Wolves, and they keep one about with them in some Space Wolf stories, but not in this book here. I'm thinking the actual Space.
So the
Marine ranks.
Skald is like the right hand man to the Great Wolf.
Oh yeah,
He's like
that guy
the
is
leader
also
of
a
the
Skald.
Rune
Yeah.
Priests.
Okay. So
Yeah.
yes, I was going to say Rune Priests, Psychers, they're the librarians. And
Yes.
they've got one other role here, which is an interesting one. I don't know if you would have picked up exactly how it worked, which is the Wolf Priest. What do you think a Wolf Priest is? Because this is what the first character was that they met back on the longboat.
Oh yeah, yes, you're right. Yeah, okay. I got a bit. I think was a bit slightly confused because he sort of hangs around with all of the Rune Priests as well. My take on him would be he's almost like, well, he was the chooser, right? So he'd be a recruiter and like a kind of
That is one of the roles of a wolf priest.
Would he be like the sort of not I was going to say librarian, but librarians are explicitly psychers usually.
Yeah.
Would he be sort of?
Are you
What was
thinking
the
of
character?
chaplains?
Yes. There's a character isn't there in the Horus Heresy books, which kind of serves a role as almost like a psychologist for.
Oh yeah, well that's chaplains.
the-
Chaplains are very much present in 40k in all legions, and in the Space Wolves they are called chaplains. They are called wolf priests, but wolf priests aren't only chaplains.
okay.
You'll notice something else he was quite involved in, which was their development
decision
into
making?
Space Marines.
Oh, okay.
Chaplains are generally respected advisors for decision making, I think, in most chapters. So wolf
Well,
priests,
he definitely seems to get a say in lots of things.
yeah, wolf priests are both chaplains and apothecaries, and they also have responsibilities in selecting aspirants. So
Okay.
that is the deal with wolf priests.
So kind of a recruiter, a medic, a psychiatrist, like everything rolled into like.
I see it here. It's described as they're responsible for the spiritual and physical well-being of other space wolves.
Okay, no, that's fair. And that makes sense with what you see him as. Although he sort of disappears from the story after the first book.
Kinda. We see him again.
I mean, he turns up.
He's very
rarely.
Well, we'll talk about that in the second book. So
Yeah. Okay.
Other thing to be noted, and the reason this is interesting, is most Space Marine chapters, when you start becoming a Space Marine, you are a scout. When you finish becoming a Space Marine, you stop being a scout and you start being a tactical Marine or something. Space Wolves do not operate that way. When you start as a Space Wolf, you are a Bloodclaw. When you are promoted out of Bloodclaw, you become a Grey Hunter. And Bloodclaws,
it's kind of like reverse almost.
So not quite. Well, yes, but not with these two. So Bloodclaws are like their assault marines, I believe. If I get anything wrong here, Jim, just tell me. So Bloodclaws are, I have a bolt pistol, I have a chainsword, I run in and hit things. Grey Hunters are more like line marines. They have got their tempers in check a bit better. They're going to stand there and blast things down with bolt guns. Scouts are typically Space Wolves who do not work so well with the others and are quite happy going off and doing their own thing, like working independently.
That's Lone Wolves.
Lone Wolves? Oh, Lone Wolves
Here's
are more
the
like...
thing,
Wait, hang on. Lone Wolves are when there's you're the last one of your pack left. That's a Lone Wolf, right?
Here's the thing, the Space Wolves is literally completely reversed. So, in an ordinary Space Marine chapter, like, say, the Ultramarines, when you start out after being a scout, you're a Devastator. Then you're a Tactical, and only the Veterans are Assault. In Space Wolves, you start as Assault, move to Tactical, and the Veterans are Devastators.
That's actually, that makes sense with the ranks that you see. And also, you just mentioned, Wozny, my answer to why they were using pistols, which is that they always use melee weapons, obsessively use a melee weapon. And that actually makes sense, as you said, because they're assault troopers. And what you said there is backed up by what the Wolf Lord says in one of the later books, where he says, oh look, the Bloodclaws have turned up. We needed more assault troops. Mm-hmm. So that kind of makes a lot of sense there as well. Yeah. Okay.
So
I see.
Another thing there, actually, now that you've mentioned Lone Wolves, has reminded me, another interesting thing going on with Space Wolves is quite often they just have, and usually it's a larger pack, I think, in current lore than what's depicted here, but you'll have Bloodclaws will start off as a unit of 20 or so, and they will stay in that pack in their for most of their service with the Space Wolves. So as members of that pack get picked off and die, that pack might get promoted to being a Grey Hunter pack. So, you might start off with 20 or so Bloodclaws, but when there's 10 or so, they might become Grey Hunters. And then as more of them die, and you've only got 5 or so left, they might, at that point, have the experience necessary to get promoted up to being Long Fangs. And when only one of them is left, they will become a lone wolf, a lone hunter. And they'll basically be dedicated to, I think they're generally fatalistic berserkers who want to avenge their fallen comrades. So
all right, it makes sense with the mentality that we see for the Space Wolves. The idea of only the strongest survive. Whittle down the numbers,
and also the wolf-themed packs.
Yes, and we do kind of see that here, except they start with a much smaller pack size. I think there's 8 of them at the start or something, and
something like that.
We lose some of them.
Yeah, I think. I get the impression, I don't know if it's stated anywhere, but I get the impression that if you have two groups of 20 Bloodclaws that got mostly annihilated in their first mission, you'd probably merge them together rather than promote them. But yeah.
Okay.
I mentioned Wolf Scouts. Sorry, go on.
I'm going to say, with this very long diatribe about the organization of Space was done, are we going to get back to them searching for that meteor in the mountains?
Oh, yeah. Well, the last thing I just wanted to mention now, I guess, is Wolf Scouts, because I mentioned it before. Wolf Scouts are they are people who don't work so well with the others, and they end up just getting picked out and being part of a scout company separately, and it's nothing to do with, you're a new Space Marine, you are a scout. Scouts are just
you are a misanthrope, get out of here.
In the Space Wolf, Scouts tend to be veterans. They tend to be pretty hardened veterans.
Yeah.
Which is almost the reverse of all the others. Instead of veterans being in Terminator armor, in the Space Wolves they wear Scout armor.
And they're all part of the Great Wolf's company, right? I think, and he allocates them out.
No, I'm pretty sure Scouts in Space Wolves are individual to each great company. I don't think there's any kind of centralized structure in Space Wolves. Pretty sure every single company, even the Great Wolves company, is entirely self-contained and can operate independently.
Okay, I think these books mention at some point that the Scouts are part of the Great Wolf's company, but that might be old lore.
There's a lot of old lore in these books.
Oh yes, especially in the book that I suspect would have had that. Oh, I have a list, and it's not going to come up much in this book. This book is actually very low, but some are about to come up now. So they go investigate this meteor. They go on into these caves, and
so on these caves, right? There's almost like a splinter race of humanity that are sort of subhuman kind of mutated monster creatures,
and they're living in pre-imperial ruins.
Yes, so I'm obligated to mention that they mention rocks that cause mutations, possibly tainted by ancient weaponry. And I had the question of, is Fenris supposed to have been some sort of nuclear apocalypse site at some point? Are they talking about radiation in this sense?
Fenris, from what we know in other material, was basically geoengineered.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Well, it's mentioned in several books, and it's also in one of the big Horus Heresy Black books, the Forge World ones.
Huh,
so they terraformed it specifically to be a Viking paradise?
It seems that way, yes.
Paradise.
Okay, fair enough.
It feels like something they might have terraformed and fucked up with. But yeah, okay. It is what it is, I guess. The Nightgangers in this, they're mutants. I think the idea was these areas, they wanted to have them so that people could hide underground from some sort of event. I think it mentions, but it didn't work out so well. And so they typically stay away from these areas and do not stay underground, because people who stay underground end up fucked up. I think it says something to that effect.
Yes, and he's describing how this happens, and he says something about the rocks or causing mutations, and something like that.
I get the impression they don't know exactly why.
Yeah, it's almost like lost history.
Mutations is, again, that's enough. There's a lot of Warhammer Fantasy references. The rocks causing mutations is Warpstone.
I was thinking Warpstone there, yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Shiny green
and there's
Warpstone, aka Radium.
Okay.
This nice glowing green rock.
And then you remember that Skaven liked to chew on that rock and eat it.
Delicious.
Yeah. I mean, people
What's
did
the Skaven life expectancy again?
5 seconds.
5 seconds after they eat the glowing rock.
Okay. So, yeah.
So there's a really nice line here. When they meet these mutants, these night gangers under the ground, there's a really nice line by Ragnar where he questions who is the mutant and who is the man, which I thought was quite great. So very self-aware that the Space Wolves are basically mutants themselves.
And then his hypno-indoctrination reminds him, no, I need to kill him.
Yeah, definitely not me. I am not a mutant. Is the enemy, yeah.
I am the Emperor's own mutant.
Yeah, so they delve down into these caves, right? And then they meet. Who did they meet, wasn't he?
They meet a Thousand Sons member called Maddox, which is a very strange name for a Thousand Son. It does not fit modern Thousand Sons naming conventions, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Maddox does not pass the vibe check.
No, I mean, I thought that was the name of a 2010s YouTuber, but,
Yes.
Maddox is he's more your generic chaos villain. He doesn't really feel like a Thousand Sun as we get to know them.
He is
on.
a Saturday morning cartoon chaos villain. He is gaudy. He is cartoony, like in terms of like how he is villainous. He is like
he's basically from Mummies Alive.
I don't get the reference.
Yeah, it shows you how old young you two are compared to me.
I'm like 2 years younger than you.
We're also not from the other side of the world, so that might be part of it.
Mummies Alive was American, it broadcast in the UK.
Well,
all right, fair enough.
Not
I didn't see
it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. So this guy reminded me specifically of a certain demon from another book series, which we will get to at some point soon, I hope. In the sense that he's set up as this like long-running villain for Ragnar, a long-running nemesis.
Oh, okay, yeah. So he is very he's set up as it's not immediately obvious that he's going to be a nemesis. You initially think he's a one and done, and then at the end of the book, it's revealed, this damn Maddox, I keep killing him. Because it's got the end of this book. The end of this book, it's revealed that the Chaos forces they are fighting against are led by Maddox, I believe, or he has met some sort of comment about remembering that fight against Maddox, and now he's fought him several times.
I thought that was the introduction. I thought that was the prologue to the next book.
Nope.
Okay, no, that's more interesting.
I remember what the prologue to the next book is, but yeah. So this book, I'll quickly mention here. I said it was bookends. So the start of a book is set in the present. The end of a book is after Ragnar has been brought back with surgery after he is taken out at the very start, and it's here we go. We get back to business in this war, and he says some comments about remembering, and now Maddox is a long nemesis, and he's had to fight him several times. It mentions that at the end of the first book.
So they meet the Thousand Suns, and I was like, "Oh, Thousand Suns, the Space Wolf nemesis that I know."
Yes,
and
then
he kicks Ragnar. He kicks Ragnar in the balls, which is clearly an evil move.
Yes, I wanna.
Sorry, I was wondering though, because they supposedly have a dreadnought there.
Did they?
Or what sounded like a dreadnought. So there's some description, and I've written in my notes here. Is this a dreadnought? And I didn't know.
I don't
was
remember
wondering
this.
if you guys noticed something about this.
I do not remember seeing something that made me think dreadnought.
Oh wait, sorry. This was the Space Wolves. So when they come out of the cave, I think this was just after they came out of the cave.
Oh, possibly,
yeah. It's a bit later then.
Yeah. Okay. I want to say as well, Maddox. He feels like he's halfway between a sorcerer and a rubric. He cuts, yeah, like a rubric marine, all his dust and all that. He cuts him open, sort of weird substance comes out, and it's not like flesh and blood in there.
Okay, so this is going to come up a lot later, so I won't mention it. I won't mention it now because it's in the third book. But there's something very strange about these Thousand Suns, which I don't think stacks up with modern law.
Correct. I have the same thought. But this guy here, so it made me think of, my initial thought was is he a sorcerer because he's using magic, or is he a rubric because he's not flesh and blood in there anymore?
He's whatever we want him to be.
Well, by the end of the book, it's revealed he's fought Maddox multiple times, which means I could probably assume it's like a simulacrum or something of him. For some reason the words not making sense in my head.
He's almost like a demon in the sense that he comes back over and over again. He doesn't die when his body dies.
That's something. He could be a demon prince. That would explain it. But I got the impression it was almost like I'm projecting a version of myself over there. It could be as well.
Yes, that would make sense with what we see later as well.
Here's a wonderful little interesting thing that they definitely retconned. The Space Wolves cleanse the Thousand Suns homeworld Prospero in the aftermath of Horus's rebellion thousands of years ago.
I had a note about that, and I couldn't remember exactly what it said in the book, but yes, it's the way it describes it is wrong, which could be considered either.
Is that retconned?
Or
is that the Space Wolves? Yeah, or is that just like propaganda, or is this
unreliable narrator?
10,000 years of lost history,
but it's definitely
I noticed
not
that
the
as
truth.
well, but I wasn't.
It's definitely not the truth.
What seems to happen in the Horus Heresy?
Yeah, current canon. Prospero fucked before the Horus Heresy ended. In fact, it's a very key part about why the Thousand Suns were not helping in the Heresy.
Yes. So all of this shit is happening. Like the guy appears, right, and he kicks Ragnar in the dick, and then like the sergeant who's with them, he says, he doesn't say this explicitly, but I'm paraphrasing. Take all of the named space marines and leave. And so so Ragnar and all of the named friends that are with him, all are told to basically evacuate, and everyone else who we don't know, like by name really, or who just appeared and was given a name, stays with the sergeant to hold them back.
And on the way out,
right?
Styrbjörn saves Ragnar's life, I think 3 times, and Ragnar saves his once. And Ragnar stays behind to help Styrbjörn out and tells the others go out and make sure the others reach us.
Yes.
And they mobilize every Space Wolf on Fenris.
Yeah, and it's like the scene from Die Hard.
You were talking about sorry. You were talking about there being a dreadnought. It wasn't just any dreadnoughts. It was a certain dreadnought named Bjorn the Fell-Handed.
Oh, yes.
From the time of Russ, or something like that, they describe it as.
Yes.
Bjorn is the oldest living space marine, or possibly oldest living member of the Imperium, I think, in 40k setting, depending on...
Holy crap.
Bjorn is still alive and kicking, and he is a dreadnought. Yes, he is a big
question.
Deal.
Are you really alive if you're a dreadnought?
Well,
I think
from some...
You're not alive in the ordinary way.
So, mostly, I would agree with that. I have seen some quotes from other books which show Bjorn having a very human mentality. I have not actually read other Space Wolf books in 40k setting, but I've seen some quotes from them with Bjorn discussing things with people, which depict him in a way more human manner than dreadnoughts are normally depicted. Let alone 10,000-year-old dreadnoughts.
Yeah, I was going to say, can you imagine being 10,000 years old? That would be extreme. And what's the has anyone ever tried, are there any scholar dreadnoughts in the 40k setting? Has anyone given one of those mechanical arms, giving it a pen attachment or something and letting them do great works of literature or something like that?
That's basically what Bjorn is, except he has to bloody say it by name, and so he memorizes it.
Yeah, Bjorn is a lot of dreadnoughts are often viewed as you're an ancient relic of our chapter. Please impart wisdom to me. They don't write things down. They're more they're often spiritual leaders alongside the chaplains, or as chaplain dreadnoughts. Sometimes
they're like song weavers or story weavers or spirit talkers or whatever the hell they call them. They're like the skulls. Skulls were kind of like that role in this sort of
Yeah, Space Wolves have them as that. A lot of chapters sort of view them as you're a beacon of wisdom for us,
Yeah. And in this case, you have a 10,000-year-old storyteller. The stories he could tell. Holy crap.
Oh, yeah.
We'll get some more fun to talk about Bjorn in later books. I mean, The Emperor's Gift, that's going to be a lot of fun.
All right.
Wait, isn't this the guy... Isn't
Bjorn, a.k.a.
Isn't
Bear.
Bjorn... Yeah, I was going to say, isn't he the guy they called Bear?
Bjorn translates to bear. Directly.
Yes, but
that is
it's the guy.
Swedish.
It's the guy who the entire short story.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah,
I novel, and we'll get there someday.
That was great. That was great.
There is so much material to cover, and we are literally only on
scratching the surface. Yeah,
we are scratching the surface.
Bjorn's a big character, and he gets given worthy treatment in the Heresy series. Yeah.
Here he's just mentioned offhand in the background.
Was he?
He's a name drop.
Because you mentioned about Space Wolfen didn't exist yet. This as a unit at this point was lore for Bjorn. Was that a thing at this point?
Yes, that was a thing. Okay. I think he even had a model at this point, but
okay,
we got to get back to it. So they go underground. They find this secret chaos temple led by Maddox.
They get out.
And the entire Space Wolf chapter that is on Fenris turns up and is outside of this cave when they leave, and all pointing spotlights at them. I said, it's like the scene in Die Hard when he finally makes it out of the hotel, and everything just turns and looks at him, and the entire police force is there. It's crazy.
And much like Die Hard, John Ragnar has already dealt with the villain.
Yes. It's already gone, and it's finished.
He's had his duel with some strong assisting from Styrbjörn, and the cocky, arrogant, cartoonish villain underestimated him and got taken down by this Bloodclaw Ragnar.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I think we're pretty much, and I think that is the end of that story. And then we go to the epilogue, right? Yeah, and as you said, we find out that the chaos.
That he's had since then fought Maddox many times.
Yeah.
Free.
So I had a question.
Yep.
I did have a question
Twice
about the entire book.
Twice I
Sorry, go
thought
on,
I
Jim.
killed him. Third time will be the charm.
So I have a question about the book as a whole, but like I guess maybe like the way the chapter works, and it seemed like a really interesting concept that they didn't explore here, and I thought that they could have. I thought King could have done some more with this because it would have been kind of neat. So you have all of these people who are pulled from this Viking society who must have their own myths and legends. Like, how could you not? If the moon is literally a wolf and all of your ancestors are like picked up by flying firebirds and taken off to fight in some crazy battle with your god Russ. What about the heroes that are already heroes in myth and legend to the clans of Fenris? What if you die in battle, you are brought back as a space wolf, and you walk down the street and it's like, holy shit, this is Steve Bjorn, my like great grandfather who was like the legend of our clan who killed like 1 billion warriors. This is him. He's here. Like,
okay,
he's alive. He's a space wolf.
And there is a reason that the space wolves generally don't interact too much with the tribes, and just leave the choosers of Fallen, aka the wolf priests, to go down and do it.
Yes, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying, what about these people who will have been known to the clans because they were part of the clans and were chosen before and were like great legends of warrior skill and cunning, right? So like, let's say Hercules, right? So ancient mythology, Greek mythology, right? Let's say this was Greek instead of Roman. Instead of Norse, because I don't know much about Norse heroes. But let's say this is Hercules. You know of a guy called Hercules because he lived like 200 years ago. He killed 1,000 people. He was like this legend amongst your people. And then you die. You get chosen. You become a space wolf, and you're walking through the Fang, and just there is Hercules. He's just there, and you're like, what?
Oh, I see.
This is the man, the legend that you knew of when you were alive.
Okay.
Well, I think it would happen with the salamanders, given they have a far more closer relationship with their people than space wolves do.
Yeah.
But the fact that they don't have a close relationship is even better.
So here's a question.
It even more crazy.
Here's a question: How many people who are heroes from the space wolves like this did Ragnar know of?
Well, that's the question we don't know because it's not King doesn't introduce it at all. Like,
so how many people know that Ragnar is a space marine?
Well, in Ragnar's case is very specific. Come on.
Yes, there is like a few people who spot him. There's like, it's implied that like there's one person in particular, and maybe some others, who maybe spot him as they're leaving on the boat, and this is addressed. They view you as a ghost. You are already dead.
But they also don't know his name, so they can't be like, this Ragnar guy. He came back as a ghost because they don't even know his name.
Some of them would. A few of them might, because it was implied as like. Some of them were like the women of his old tribe being taken.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, so
there's a few people there.
Might girlfriend, have. Yeah, they would know.
But they specifically like avoid. They wouldn't look at him. It said because he was already dead as far as they were concerned.
Okay, but if one of those was chosen later and then turns up, they later on they'd be like, "Holy shit, this is Ragnar. This was the ghost."
Yes, but
like,
what are the
chances
never
explored?
That? Bearing in mind though that
they live forever.
Yes, but bearing in mind that the people who are going to be who saw him are not going to be eligible to become aspirants forever. In fact, chances are most of them aren't or will not become space.
Yeah, this is why I'm talking about like maybe this is why I'm talking about legendary figures that would be like passed down a few generations.
But is Ragnar going to become a legendary figure?
No, specifically, I'm not talking about Ragnar. I'm talking about like, let's say someone else or anybody was brought up in like you say the chances is really low, right? But the more like people that are involved in this, and the more people from different areas of the world, the more likely it is, right? The more, so say you have like 14 people in a lift, there's almost like a guaranteed chance that that 2 people will share a birthday, even though there's so many days in a year, right? Just because everybody individually has a different.
It can literally just be like, hang on, I've shown up here, I recognize you, I used to know you, I thought you died. It doesn't need to be about like a legend thing. It can just be that. I follow.
Even just that. Yeah. Even just that, like, yeah, exactly.
It could happen.
But it would be crazy if it was a legend thing. Like, imagine you go there and you meet. What the hell's that? What the hell's that book? The story, the ancient mythology. You mentioned it earlier with Grendel.
Beowulf.
What if you go there and you meet Beowulf and you're like, holy shit, he's an actual guy, and he's been a space wolf for like 300 years.
I feel like it felt implied that the space wolf mythology, as known by the people of Fenris, was a lot more vague than that. And their idea of a hero is like Russ, who they are not likely to meet.
Okay, but you know how, like, so you say more vague than that, right? But if anything, they are us with no evidence for mythology, but in a world where the moon is literally a wolf, Russ did exist, actual firebirds come and steal their dead and make them into warriors. So they're basically us, but with actual evidence for their mythology. So the mythology, I can't see it being more vague than ours.
Yeah, but their mythology doesn't seem to be about loads of different people. It seems to be more about the general idea of what, I don't know. I get what you mean. Like,
only because King didn't explore it is what I'm saying, though. Like,
okay,
only because King didn't explore it at all.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm just saying it could have been a cool concept, but like it wasn't really looked at.
I get you. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to have my little rant about that because I thought that would have been a really interesting aspect. But
I follow you now. Yeah. What could have been?
So have we finally finished talking about Space Wolf?
Well, no, because we have one more thing to do, which is to say, what do we think about Space Wolf? We have our what are our thoughts?
Our final thoughts.
Final thoughts. We're out of the spoiler zone.
I want Jim to go first because
yeah.
Come on, Jim.
Go for it.
Space Wolf
give us your thoughts.
It's so charming to read these days.
Fair enough. I think Space Wolf explores things that are not explored much in other books, and it was a good read. There's maybe a very small caveat of if you like disc grenades.
There's another 2 books where there's going to be all the disc grenades you can possibly want.
Certain enemies in the book might not be portrayed that way in modern setting. Generally, the book is a recommendation for me, I think, because it is. This book doesn't have too much that is like off the wall in terms of comparing it to current canon. There's a few things that would feel a bit off, but generally, it still feels like a very good introduction to the idea of what is a Space Marine. If you want to know about what does it mean to be a Space Marine, this book is a very good book to read. And it's well written. It's got a sort of classic, charming style, and it's very. The only thing to know is that Space Wolves are not the same as all Space Marines. But otherwise, yeah, it's a good book at what it aims to do.
Space Wolves today are not the same as they were when this book was written.
Yeah, but I think this book generally holds up quite well. I think for the most part.
So yeah, as you said there, I don't think we came across many things in this book specifically that are very different from current lore. There's a few things we discussed which seem like an interesting quirk to an idea, but I don't think there was any I don't think there was a huge amount of massive inaccuracies to current lore. Or anyway, but I really liked it. I thought it was a really good book. I enjoyed this probably as much as I enjoyed Gaunt's Ghosts, but for different reasons. Gaunt's Ghosts is obviously very serious, very sort of gritty, interesting, like very focused on character development. This book was kind of like an interesting world development, which I enjoyed just as much, I think. And I was quite surprised because I didn't really know what to think going in on the information I had from Jim. He sort of said the entire book series was very interesting, but with some very silly aspects. And the silly aspects are to come, definitely. But so far, the interesting bit was absolutely accurate. So I would definitely recommend.
So our next episode will be on Ragnar's Claw. See you soon with that, hopefully.